Hello friends, this is Sanjay. This is part 3 of the series where I am covering the interpretation of statutes and the principles of legislation as per the standard LLB syllabus. The complete playlist for this series is available on the Lawment YouTube channel. In the previous video, we discussed about all the internal aids to interpretation of statutes. All those things that can be found inside the statute itself are internal aids. Everything else that can be used to interpret a statute but is not available inside the statute itself is an external aid. In this video, we will be covering all the external aids to interpretation and construction of statutes. We can start the discussion on external aids to interpretation with the historical background of the statute, which is usually available in the parliamentary reports on the bill before it became an act. The historical background tells us why the bill was needed in the first place and what were the steps that were followed to draft the bill and also how it became an act. And all of this is quite helpful in understanding the true objective of the bill or the act. Historical background can also tell us if the statute is currently relevant or not. For example, if a statute was passed primarily to frame the rules to be followed while hunting tigers, and subsequently hunting is completely banned, then the old act is not relevant anymore. Another aspect that is connected with the history of a statute is previous laws on the same subject. For example, if we are looking at interpreting a provision in the Companies Act of 2013, we can look at the previous acts on the same subject. In some situations, an old law can help in closing gaps in the new law. Suppose that a new statute is enacted that prohibits the sale of alcohol to minors. And the new statute does not define what constitutes a minor. Then the courts can look at previous laws on the same or similar subject to see how this term minor has been defined in the past. For example, a previous law may have defined a minor as anyone under the age of 18. The courts could then use this older definition to interpret the term minor in the new statute. In this way, previous laws can be used to provide context, clarify meaning, and also fill gaps in the new statutes. When judges make a decision on a case, they explain their reasoning, and this explanation or reasoning can then be used as a guide in similar situations in the future. These are what we refer to as judicial precedents. In India, the principle of judicial precedent, also known as stare decisis, is a critical aspect of legal practice. A judicial precedent becomes mandatory for lower courts when a higher court has established a legal principle after deliberating on a matter. So, precedents set by the Supreme Court should be mandatorily followed by all courts across India. And precedents set by a high court should be followed by the courts that fall under its jurisdiction. Which means that if the higher courts have interpreted a statute in a specific way, and a lower court is faced with the same or similar questions, then the precedent set by the higher court needs to be followed. Legislative history is similar to historical background, but it is more focused on what happened in the legislative process. For example, why was the new law required? When was the bill introduced? What happened with the specific bill? What were the amendments to the bill before it became an act? What were the subsequent amendments made to the act? Documents like the Law Commission reports can help in understanding the legislative history of a statute, and it can help the courts interpret the true intent of the legislature. References to other statutes is quite self-explanatory. If we look at this example from the SEBI Act, it is making references to other acts such as the Companies Act, the Securities Contracts Regulation Act. Many statutes make references to other statutes for meanings, definition, context, and exceptions. This cross-referencing ensures that there is no ambiguity. And in a case of two statutes covering the same subject, one of the statutes itself will clarify which statute between the two takes precedence. All of you are familiar with dictionaries. They give us the meaning of words and also how these words can be used in sentences. There are also specialized law dictionaries that focus on legal terminology. Sometimes statutes include words that are a little unclear, or there might be a situation where there is a doubt on how a particular word should be interpreted. And dictionaries can be quite useful here. You can find plenty of High Court and Supreme Court decisions which reference to dictionary meanings of various words. The Supreme Court has observed that the dictionaries can always be referred to in order to ascertain not only the meaning of the word but also the general usage of such words. Of course, dictionary meanings and definitions should be used for understanding the common usage of the words only. Dictionary meanings cannot be used to change the context of the law itself. Foreign judgments may have persuasive value, but it is not mandatory for Indian courts to follow them. We can see court decisions referring to foreign judgments, especially judgments from common law countries, whose judicial systems can be traced back to the British legal system. Foreign judgments are often used in situations where a particular statute has been written using a foreign statute as a base. For example, there are several features of the Indian Constitution that are based on the constitutions of other countries. So, if there is a question around interpreting such articles, foreign judgments can be used to persuade the court. Foreign judgments can also be useful where a foreign law has the same or very similar objectives as an Indian law. For example, the data protection laws of Europe have similar objectives to the Indian data protection laws. So, foreign judgments that interpret the foreign law can be used by the courts as an example. In this example, there is a reference to a decision by the American Supreme Court and how that principle of law is accepted by the Indian courts. Treatises and commentaries are legal books written by experts on a particular topic. They may be new books, old books, or even ancient books. In this example, you can see that there is a reference to Maine's treatise on Indian law, which in turn refers to much older manuscripts on Hindu family law, such as the Dharam Sindhu, Samskar Kaustubh, Dattak Nirnay, Dattak Chandrika, and Dattak Mimamsa. Treatises and commentaries have been used mostly in interpretation of family laws, where the current laws may be derived from ancient customs and traditions. If you go to the Parliament website, you will see that all debates are recorded and available for review. Now, when a statute is to be enacted, it is presented in the Parliament as a bill, and it becomes an act only after the approval by the Houses of the Parliament. During the approval process, there would have been some discussions or debates on the bill. Some questions asked by the members of the Parliament, answers and clarifications on those questions, etc. Subsequently, if there is a question around the interpretation of that statutes, the courts can also refer to the parliamentary debates for clarity on the legislative intent. What did the makers of this law want to achieve through this law? Some statutes, like the Environment Protection Act and the Human Rights Act, are based on international conventions and agreements. In fact, the acts themselves mention this clearly. The Environment Protection Act is based on the United Nations Conference on Human Environment, and the Protection of Human Rights Act is based on several international covenants that India is a party to. So, if there is a question about the interpretation of such statutes that are based on international law, covenants or agreements, then the origin or the source itself can be used as a reference to understand the intention and the scope of the Indian law. Of course, it is not necessary that India has to agree with everything that is mentioned in the international convention or agreement. So, the courts will also refer to the Law Commission reports, parliamentary debates, and other documents to interpret the law in the Indian context. To ensure uniformity in the interpretation of statutes, there may be references to the General Clauses Act. The General Clauses Act provides uniform definitions. For example, the meaning of the term regulation in the CPC will be the same as in any other statute that uses the term, if they all refer to the General Clauses Act. The General Clauses Act provides uniform interpretation rules and standard legal procedures and formalities, such as a standard for the computation of time. Like, what does it mean when a statute says something has to be done within 1 month? Is it 28 days, 30 days, 31 days? And the General Clauses Act can also provide a clear definition of the powers and functions of authorities. So, the General Clauses Act is an important aid in the interpretation of statutes. The courts will have to consider social, political, economic, and scientific developments while interpreting statutes. For example, when the original telecommunication laws were written, telegraphs were being used commonly. So, the laws were mainly written to cover the transmission of the written word through a wire. Then came telephones, which brought in transmission of the spoken word, that is, voice through a wire. Then came mobile phones, which meant transmission of written words, that is SMS, and also the spoken word wirelessly. Then came smartphones, which meant transmission of written words, voice, and also electronic documents through the internet. So, the telecommunication statutes had to be interpreted after taking into account the scientific and technological developments of the specific time. Then comes the Constitution of India. This is something I have previously covered in the Constitutional Law series. The Constitution is the primary rule book of the country. All procedures and guidelines that we see in public and private institutions are based on various rules and regulations. These rules and regulations are based on various central and state legislations. And all the legislations in India must adhere to the broad framework provided by the Constitution. For example, no laws or statutes can contravene the fundamental rights guaranteed by the Constitution. The powers of any authorities cannot exceed the limits set by the Constitution. So, whenever there is a question of the interpretation of any laws, especially if the law seems to be interfering with fundamental rights or constitutional rights, or seems to be in contravention of any other article of the Constitution, then the Constitution itself should be used as an aid to interpretation. And then we have the rules of interpretation of statutes. These are the primary rules such as the literal rule, the golden rule, the mischief rule, and the subsidiary or the secondary rules such as the egestum generis rule, redendo singula singulis. While interpreting statutes, the courts will start with the primary rules and then apply the secondary rules to fine-tune the interpretation. We will discuss all of these primary and secondary rules in detail in the other videos in this series. With that, we have come to the end of this video. Thank you in advance for your like and subscription. We will meet again shortly in the next video. Take care and stay safe.